All right, thank you. Welcome, everyone, to the February 29th, happy Leap Day, session of the Appropriations Committee, calling it to order. To start off, we have a few people attending. We'd like to open it up for if there's any public comment, any questions before we get started, and entertain any comments from the public. Seeing none, we'll get on to our first order of business, which is the approval of minutes for February 15th.
Move to approve the minutes of February 15th.
Thank you, Bob.
Second?
Okay, moved and seconded. Any comments on the minutes? This was the first time we've seen this setup from Angie. Everybody happy with the format, level of detail, the way the links operate? I want to make a comment on that. Really like the linked content in the minutes.
Mr. Chair, if I could, the whole concept of the meeting link, we want to get, we're kind of a state law to capture the gist of the meeting and the votes, but to actually have a link on the meeting minutes to get people to watch the video if they so desire. It's easier to locate. It's another level of transparency we're trying to provide by putting it on this. So I think it's on the last page. And actually, my intent was to really get it on the bottom of every page, but this might be, the second, third time through. We'll always try to make enhancements as we go. But she did a great job with those.
Yeah, and if anything, I think there's an opportunity with a link to the actual recording meeting that could even reduce some of the verbiage around the discussions to just keep it crisp. But this was a very nice balance and links to all the supporting documents as well as the recorded session. So yeah, please, I know I said it earlier, but once again, pass along the thanks to Angie on that. She did a great job. With that, no other discussion, take a vote. All approved or all in favor? All right, passes unanimously. Thank you very much. First up, we have the Senior Center budget presentation.
Hi everybody, I'm Kendra Feldetta, the Senior Center Director. I put together a really quick presentation that kind of goes along with the information that I handed out. And if you'll notice, front and center is the new police chief, Brian Griffin. Point that out for you. So this is actually some, it's a little slow. This is some drone footage of the senior center. For some reason is sputtering. But this was just to show our trunk or treat program. And our trunk or treat program, we actually hosted about 800 people this year, and 500 of that was mostly children. The 800, of course, is their accompanying adults, but that was a really great intergenerational opportunity, and it brought a lot of people to the Senior Center that don't often get to experience what we do there on a regular basis, which is always really great. In the year 2023, we had almost 20,000 people swipe into our My Senior Center program. Not everybody is captured in that number, only because the swipe in is suggested, but they have to opt in and do it themselves. So it can be really hard to remember if you're running late for a class and you just run in. You might not stop or swipe in, but we do heavily encourage everyone that comes in to swipe in. And through our My Senior Center program, we're actually able to keep track of notes for our outreach workers. She can make some case notes that she and I can see that are confidential. We're able to have someone's emergency contact information if there was to be an accident at the Senior Center. And we can also see how our classes are doing. So if we notice that we are offering a yoga class that gets 3 or 4 participants, we may be able to remove that from rotation and fill it in with something that is a little bit more popular. So it's been really great to monitor the trends at the Senior Center. In 2023, aside from Bistro 119, we had 3,105 programs, which are mostly instructor-led. Some of them are volunteer-led as well. In our van, our 4 part-time van drivers did 3,169 rides. We are currently the only public transportation in the town of Northborough, and so we transport adults over the age of 65, as well as ADA clients, so adults with disabilities.
Kendra, may I ask you the chair, the 119 bistro programs, can you give us an example of 1 or 2 of those?
So the Bistro 119 would be any of our lunches, so that would be Monday through Thursday, we're serving lunch. We didn't include that in the programming, as well as our dinner options, so we do have dinner once a month.
Go the other way, so that, or is it left, right, Owen, or is it front, back?
Yeah, I think it's left, right.
Okay. That doesn't matter which way, sorry.
So, yeah, that doesn't include our lunches Monday through Thursday, or anything special like that. This PowerPoint's giving me a little bit of a. Here we go. This was just Cooking with Rose. You might recognize her from NCAT. She does do her cooking show on there at various times, and she's doing sushi next month if anyone's interested in learning how to make sushi. So in the year 2023, we had 2,575.8 logged volunteer hours. So we rely really heavily on volunteers. They are typically the person that will answer the phone at the senior center. They are the people that will greet you when you come in. They help in the bistro. They do the dishes. They take your order. They serve your order. We have volunteers that instruct different groups. We have a genealogy group that's run by a volunteer. Our writing group is run by a volunteer. Our trivia group is run by a volunteer. Our men's group is run by a volunteer. So we really heavily utilize volunteers all over the place. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, we have a maintenance volunteer who, since COVID, he refills all of our hand sanitizers, wipes down all the door handles, and any commonly used surface. So we have a whole broad spectrum of volunteers at the senior center. As well as one of our most important programs is SHINE, which is serving health insurance needs for everyone. So we have 3 SHINE counselors. They each do once a week appointments, and then during open enrollment, they'll take quite a few more. So they saw almost 400 people with health insurance questions, so they can help with anything from Medicaid and Medicare to what type of supplement you should be taking, and it's been really great. It's a really successful program. We have one outreach counselor, so she spent almost 2,000 hours serving 418 different individuals. And so she was the only person that was helping with the SMOC applications this winter. So she was doing applications for fuel assistance. She can help with SNAP and food stamps. She can help with housing, sort of any paperwork needs she can fill in, which is wonderful. And on average, we saw about 80 people every day, which we've been pretty busy. Yeah, this presentation is, I think, just giving me a bit of a hard time.
Well, that's all, can you talk about, you had, when I was there just 2 weeks ago, you had somebody helping with taxes.
Yes, so we use AARP for tax services. We have 5
Let's skip right to the end.
Yeah. We have 5 tax volunteers that are here every Wednesday during the tax season, and so they each take 5 appointments, so that's 25 people every Wednesday that are getting their taxes done by tax professionals for free. So they are able to schedule appointments in advance, and it typically takes about an hour to get through all your taxes. People bring their tax documents, and it gets all submitted digitally, so as soon as you leave, you're free to go. You really don't have anything else to do. Your taxes are all done, which is really great.
Sorry, thank you.
No, that's okay. And this is just our senior citizen chorus. So that is a new group that we started in the last year. They have about 40 members at this time. They perform with a live band, so they have a guitar, bass, drums, and keyboard. They do some coordinated dancing, and they had their premiere concert. They had 120 people that came out to watch them. and they have a lot of fun. They probably have more fun than anybody else at the senior center, which has been really cool to watch. And that all started, our music instructor who teaches other classes at the senior center had the idea. We showed a documentary about seniors and music, and this group has really taken off, so we're very proud of them. Those are sort of the highs for the senior center for this year.
Yeah, and thank you for the infographic as well.
Yeah,
That's great to see.
It's the same information, but written down.
Excellent. So, yeah, and thanks for giving both the folks here at the moment, but then folks that might be watching later on, that highlight, that summary of what's happening in each of the departments. I think that's great for everybody to see, so thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you. As far as our budget goes, I think it's pretty straightforward. I'm happy to answer any questions. Some of it has been absolved and taken into the maintenance budget. So now that we have Sean Thompson, who has been able to manage and help us out with some stuff, that was really the only big change.
On the Excel spreadsheet that you have here, I just call your attention to the overall general fund budget, $79,637,159.39% of that excluding debt. You get a lot from the presentation. You can see, and you spend very little on senior services. But actually a community event with all the volunteers to get all those services done, but we get a very good value for the dollar, a big bang for the buck. But and I know you walked me through these line items before, but probably for the committee, you might just want to walk me through the lines.
Absolutely. So I mentioned our public transportation, our van drivers. That is paid all through a contract with the WRTA, so that we employ the van drivers, but the WRTA reimburses us for the hours they spend driving or at training. The WRTA also owns the 3 vans that are at the senior center, so any maintenance, oil change, new tires, anything like that goes through the WRTA. If we have some sort of issue with the van, I'm able to call them and they will send a mechanic out to pick up the van and send it back repaired. So the town is not incurring any cost there. We pay up front, but it is always reimbursed, which is great. We also rely pretty heavily on the formula grant, which pays for our part-time program coordinator, and it also pays for 2.5 hours every week of our outreach coordinator's time, but the rest is paid through the town. Our Bistro 119 is funded on their own revenue, so the 2 employees as well as the supplies, they earn revenue, and that is what is then spent to make Bistro 119 run. Jason's looking at me probably because I'm not great with the financial terms.
I was just prepared in case you had any questions.
Right. Any of our yoga instructor, Manoj, who is instructing our singing group, that is also paid through the formula grant, as well as the nominal fee that people pay to participate in those classes. Our utilities, National Grid is obviously our biggest bill, and that is because we have a geothermal system, so we run fully on electricity, so we don't have the oil or propane costs that other buildings might have. For contractual services, that's our copier, AED maintenance, so they come out and check the batteries, make sure it's working properly, and then the My Senior Center database is the tool that we use to track all of our numbers at the senior center.
Can I ask a question on that line?
Yeah.
Before we move on? It just jumps all over the place. I mean, 2023 is 33,000, then 2024 is just 1,200, then it jumps up to 331,000 now, and then next year it's going to go down to 3,800. Why is it just so uneven like that?
Sorry, which?
Contractual services, the one you're talking about right now.
The jump this year, I think, is because Sean took some of the things, Sean, the maintenance director, some of our subscriptions and contracts went through his. So we last year we're paying Best Pro, which is our cleaning company. That's now been taken out and put into his budget instead of ours.
Yeah, it just goes down and then goes back up and then it goes back down again. I was just wondering why the anomalies, that's all.
Well, Bob, I mean, if I can jump
Yeah,
in.
yeah, please.
This is one of the late-breaking things that we were analyzing, was
Yeah.
I think that some of the contractual services that were meant for the formula grant were charged to their contractual services line. So some of the 31,000 this year needs to be reclassified to the grant.
Oh, this is a one-time thing that,
Oh,
I
Kind
think
of.
it's in error.
oh, is it?
But
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So that 6-month point on
The
2024,
6-month number is.
and so really
It's not-
comparing the
It won't
budget
be
for
that by the end of the year,
2024
correct.
and the
Right.
budget for 2025.
right.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I see now, okay.
Printing is
Alright.
anything that our Canon copier can't handle. So that would be like large posters or, anything that we would need for advertising, like tablecloths for events or something like that.
Just to hold you there and go back to Bob's
Okay.
point. So the drop we see in 2023 to 24 is a result of shifting the contractual services into facilities.
Yes.
Yes,
Right.
in the budget, correct,
Right.
yes.
Sorry about that, Glenn.
Oh,
Get
no,
her- keep
no.
going.
Custodial supplies, so, the custodial contract is through maintenance, but we do the supply ordering, when our custodian needs, anything new, trash cans, cleaning supplies, anything like that. And the senior center programs is the $2,000, it's just to supplement the programs that we already have, things that aren't covered with the formula grant. And travel mileage is pretty straightforward, and dues, MCOA is, the overseeing organization for all senior centers in the state of Massachusetts. NCOA is the national level of that, and our motion picture license is what gives us permission to show movies.
Back to the consolidation of a lot of the maintenance and services into facilities. Do you have a feel for what that consolidation saved us? Any kind of rough ideas?
That's a hard answer upfront like that, because I believe the savings is gonna be in terms of the enhanced lifespan of the buildings and the
Right.
facilities, because we're now adding costs by identifying problems and fixing them. So there may be a short term for some of the maintenance contracts not needing to have emergency services being done. But
Any
I don't
benefit?
have a tangible number for that.
A benefit of having, rather than having 3 separate contracts or 3 separate
Correct,
services, companies, we've at least got the benefit of consolidating that and operating a single contract and hopefully some economy of scale from that perspective. Okay, thank you.
I think too, just, I don't have any building experience as a senior center director, so it's been really beneficial there when we had our heating issues. I wouldn't have really known where to go or how to start with a repair like that. So I'm sure that there was money saved just by being able to identify what the issue was and not,
Want to talk a little bit about the issues this year?
yeah, sure.
I mean, probably not. The answer is probably no, if you would. My literal question gave you a chance to say, no, I don't want to talk about it. But I think it's good to mention
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
things that have come up.
So in the week between Christmas and New Year's, our heat went out, which is probably the worst time for that to happen because it is cold, and in addition to that, everybody is on some sort of vacation or break. So it was bad timing. The part that they needed to do, this is where I started to lose it a little bit, but the part that was needed for the repair, the company that manufactures that part takes a week off between Christmas and New Year, so there was no one to manufacture the part that was needed to complete the repair. So the problem was identified pretty early on, but the problem, there was no solution because the part was not in existence at that time. So we did unfortunately have to close for about 2 weeks because that was how long it took to get the part, and then to have the company come out and do the repair. The geothermal system is great in a lot of ways, but is not necessarily designed for the weather that we have in New England. And I think when they put that system in place, the intentions were great, but it has been very challenging to get it to work for what we need it to work for. My in my knowledge of that is very rudimentary. I don't have a lot of expertise there. But my understanding is that it was the pump that takes the groundwater and heats it up. The pump was not operating. So the building got to about 36 degrees in that week. So we were trying to fill in, and we did a lot from home, but we were trying to be there to, you know, help serve meals or something like that. But it was very cold. It was pretty impossible to inhabit the building. It was just not going to be able to happen. And like I said, the timing was very unfortunate. And then we also had our flood. We lost, I think, about 1,500 gallons of water when our fire suppression system had a pipe burst in our computer room. So that damaged the computer room as well as our exercise room that is adjacent to the computer room. So we are still waiting on exactly what that's going to mean in the long term. Right now it's sectioned off, so people are not able to get to that part of the hallway. Maintenance has been working with the insurance company, and I know they're exploring all the possible options. We only had to close for 1 day for that because they were able to section it off and get the electricity back, which has been really great. So.
And it might be too early, but any long-term ideas, preventative maintenance or adjustments to reduce risks going forward?
For that particular piece, there was a piece of insulation that when they fixed the heating system, they didn't put it back with the, it's a dry system for half the building and a wet system for the other half, so where it was wet, they did not put a wet, you know, that water's in that pipe now, but half of our building doesn't have water in it. They didn't put the insulation back in the right spot, so we're having discussions with the insurance company for submitting the claim to get, you know, that contractor to pay for that.
Yeah, on the claim. I'm thinking longer term on the geothermal or other systems. Are
But
there
we
some?
have, I think we have a redundancy and a backup maintenance plan for that system. You know, we can look at things like a 25A program where we have a energy efficiency program where you use the cost savings from
Yeah.
the energy that you don't consume to pay debt service. So we can look at that whole model town-wide and replace systems that are, you know, either end of life or this one that just seems to keep giving us trouble. But there's, you know, I don't know if Scott's working with Sean on a particular plan to replace, but it's a very big number.
Right.
We're not afraid of it, it's something we have to do. But we hope the repairs we've made will get it to work the way it's supposed to.
And right now, there's 2 heat pumps that operate the building. One is working, and then they have the other one in reserve. And that is because in April, they're going to do April or May, when we don't need the heat on, they're going to do a bigger repair to preserve the life of it.
Okay.
So they'll be able to switch them both on at that time. But they don't want to turn the heat off now while it's still cold out. They're waiting to do that bigger repair until we don't really need the heat on.
Gotcha, that makes sense. All right, thank you.
And just one other point about the electricity, you know, electricity is volatile. We're in with Constellation New Energy. It's a Maya program from Mass Municipal Association. So we just signed, we went from 15 cents to 13 cents per kilowatt. So we
That's good.
drew that down starting next month. So we hope to do better, but that's pretty low compared to what we were. So that, all the utilities for the Council on Aging are electric. There's no gas.
Yeah.
So that number's pretty big for a building. So anytime we can reduce that kilowatt hour charge, we'll be saving money.
I do think too, when the building was constructed and the geothermal system was put in place, electricity was a lot less expensive than it is now. So unfortunately, that number is really dependent on what the price of electricity is.
Sounds good. Other questions on senior center budget? Good,
I'm good.
all right. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Actually, no one, you guys don't have a slide or anything.
Do you want?
You can take that with you.
I'm gonna go back
Actually,
to-
I could move to the back.
Oh, no, that's fine, I was just gonna go to full lights.
Yeah.
Can I make a comment?
Oh, sure, yeah.
Besides what the town pays for the senior center, the Friends of the Northborough Senior Center spend approximately $25,000 a year on programs at the senior center. We pay, this year, 2023 was $18,000 to mail that Northborough Times to 2,700 households. So in addition to what the town spends, there's a 501c3 organization that over the last 10 years has averaged $25,000 towards the senior center. We have other costs like insurance, but, because our budget's around 35 or 37,000. But we give to the town at least 25,000 a year. 2 years ago, when they put the audio-visual system in, they came up short $10,000 for what you had allocated. We put in the $10,000. I did put in a claim for ARPA money, which I haven't seen yet.
Notwithstanding that, besides the thanks to the volunteers at the senior center, definitely friends of the senior centers and the work that you all do, really appreciated. Like Tim said, we're getting so much service out of that area with very little money.
I'd like to see if we could get some solar panels on that roof or on the land, because we're behind the times. Solar should be there to solve some of the electricity problems we have there. So I'd like to see us think about that in the future. I know the new fire station is thinking the same way, to get some solar to get to the times where we are today. So I'd like you guys to think about doing that.
Good stuff. Thanks for that. I'm going to take the lights back up just for the next conversation. Next up, library budget presentation.
Good luck.
I don't want to follow me.
Watch the cord. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody.
Thanks again, Ken.
It's so cool hearing everything that the senior center does. This is one of my favorite nights, because I get to listen to what the health department's up to and the senior center and everything. Tonight with me, you might know him from a different hat. I have Vice Chair of the Board of Trustees, Mitch Cohen, with me. Normally Michelle Reville would be here, she's our board chair, but she was unable to make it tonight, so we have Mitch representing the, currently, it's a 9-person board, but we have 1 vacancy, so we have 8 people on that board. I will start by telling you about 2023, which was pretty successful for us, numbers-wise. We, for the first time since 2009, were able to reopen on Monday mornings. So we traditionally, until July 1st, were open at noon. We were able to expand those hours to start opening at 9:30 in the morning, like we do with every other day of the week. So, and that was made possible through donations that enabled us to increase a part-time position to a full-time position so that we could have enough staff there on Monday mornings to be able to open. Just in the first 6 months, we had about 2,500 to 3,000 patrons coming in between 9:30 and noon on Mondays, so it's been really successful. It's worth noting that we haven't put any events on Monday mornings. What we wanted was 1 morning a week where we weren't doing story times. Our story times are so popular that you really can't use the library for anything else while story time is happening, because there's no parking and there's a lot of children. So it gets very loud. So we wanted at least 1 morning a week where people could come in and quietly talk to staff and browse. And people have been really appreciative of having those hours restored. Beyond that, we did a comprehensive update of the Northborough Community Resource Guide. The first printing happened, and then the 988 Suicide Crisis Hotline came out, and so many of those resources kind of started funneling into that national hotline. So a lot of the things in the first printing changed, so we went ahead and just redid everything, reprinted it. We made it available in a little bit more of a searchable format on our website. And so if you haven't gotten a copy, you can get them at pretty much any town building. I think there should be some here, some at the senior center, police and fire station, and the library. We also, as of
July 1st, assumed ownership of the Northborough Guide, which used to be run by a local business. That is a website and a newsletter that gives people the ability to know what is happening with community events. So any nonprofit or committee or any groups in town, if they have an event coming up that they want to promote, they can send it to us. We put it out in that newsletter. And on that, it's a separate website right now. There's also a directory of local businesses, which we're working on updating and revising and making it link right out to local business websites so that our Northborough businesses, our small businesses in particular, can get a little bit more visibility, particularly when people move into town. They're looking for local people that are trusted. This is an easy place to go to find that information. We held about 723 programs, and we had about 22,619 attendees altogether. That is, it's worth noting that all of our programs are funded through the Friends of the Library. There's no money in this budget for programming. So they do a lot of book sales and a lot of fundraisers to kind of make that possible every year. It's about a $15,000 budget.
That's what I was just gonna ask, given that Henry was advertising the 25K for the Friends of Senior Center. Thank you.
Some of the programs that we did this year included bigger family programs. So we did our first ever community art show over the summer, which was a really cool event where anybody, even could be a professional artist or an amateur of any age, could submit a piece of artwork. We displayed it all summer in our meeting room. We had people could come in and vote, so there was judging. We had prizes at the end. Almonds came in with their ice cream truck at the end. It was pouring down rain, and we had 200 people in line for ice cream waiting outside. It was a lot of fun. We had over 170 submissions of artwork by different people. So that was a huge success. We did an intergenerational mini golf in the library and gaming history programs. So they took everything from an Atari all the way to the most recent Nintendo Switch models, and they set them up in the meeting room and just let people play. So like, people got really competitive. We had over 400 people show up for that event, between the gaming and the mini golf, which was all throughout the library, and watching people get super competitive with their kids over like the very first Mario on regular Nintendo was really kind of fun. And then we did a haunted library for the first time, which I think is going to end up being an annual event. We had over 200 people show up and walk through the library. We had actors from Algonquin's theater program. Their makeup and set designers came and just completely transformed the library. They did everybody's makeup. They had a whole storyline and actors and everything. It was just the right amount of scary and the right amount of fun.
No special appearances from Tamika Flynn?
No,
Okay.
maybe next year. And then one of the projects that we've been kind of mentioning and working on for a couple of years now is transitioning all of our collections from the Dewey Decimal System to the BISAC system, which is what the booksellers use. So, for example, if you were looking for a cookbook, you wanted to learn how to bake, or you wanted recipes, the Dewey Decimal number is 641.5397 or something like that. It now says cooking, baking. So we started with our children's collection, and we finished that this year, and we're so excited. That was thousands of books, mostly done by 3 staff members and 5 volunteers. So it took a really long time, but now it's worth it because you can see children come in and they look and they know exactly where to go. Parents can find books on their own. The numbers made absolutely no sense to anybody, and now we have a browsable collection that people can find, and the numbers are really supporting the success of that project. So hopefully next year we'll be finished with the entire library and everything will match thing that I want to do is kind of brag on my staff a little bit, because this is not because of me, but our library was nominated by Congressman Jim McGovern for a national medal for museum and library services. My fingers and toes have been crossed for 8 months waiting to find out if we are a finalist or if we're gonna win. They won't announce that until the spring. But that was a big deal. That is through the Institute for Museum and Library Services, so that's a national award. So we were really sort of honored to be nominated for that, and the biggest reason for that was the strength of our programming. So we are kind of on the smaller end of, the state is divided into population groups for towns. So where we fall in our population group, we're like the 5th smallest by population, but the 7th or 8th largest in program attendance. So people are really, really responding to the events that the staff are putting on, and really enjoying the social aspect that we're providing for the community. So really excited for them. That was a big deal. Looking into 2024, we're hoping to translate the community resource guide. So we're working on translating that into, there's 7 languages that we've identified that we'd like to prioritize. That was something that the schools had requested, either making it a format that they can translate, or it's always better to get it translated than to run it through Google Translate. It's a lot more accurate. So that's something that we're prioritizing. Updating that local business guide, we're working on a whole new strategic plan, which is going to continue to focus on health and wellness aspect of the community, what we can do to support other departments in their work, and what we can do for the community in terms of programming, information resources, and strengthening those partnerships. And to finish that conversion project with our collections. And I unfortunately lost my children's librarian. She was selected for an assistant director position in a neighboring town. She's been around for 8 years, and people absolutely loved her, so that was a big loss for us. But we wish her all the best. We love her. She still comes back every once in a while to visit. I glare at her. So I'll be looking to replace her this year as well. Any questions about that? So I don't have a PowerPoint, but I do talk a lot. So
Was she the one that did a lot of the children's programs that were, like the 2-year-olds and things like that?
she did, yep, the
Okay.
0 to 2.
I think I know who
was-
it is, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, she did a great job,
her.
yeah.
She's so friendly. She
Yeah.
could sing, she could speak 3 languages. She was absolutely amazing.
It's funny, I come full circle now. My kids used to use the library all the time. Then we had this long gap, and now I got grandkids, so they're using the library a lot now, so it's great. It's great programs. You guys doing a good job.
Thank you.
I do have a question, though.
Sure.
I'm reading your professional librarian salaries. It's very well detailed, but, so I see 78,000 for the funding is to reinstate a eliminated position. Okay. Was there anything else that was needed? I mean, you have a lot of things listed here that you're asking for, but you haven't gotten it yet, I guess, and that you're seeking?
In the professional librarian salary?
Yeah, you mentioned in here that you would like to see someone for monitoring. It's in the next page. Anyway, was there other positions that you were looking for to fill? That was my question.
No, not in that professional line item. It was just
Okay.
the previously eliminated position of the
Okay, so it's the 78,000 to cover that?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I was just curious, because it was a lot there, and I was just wondering if it was just more people you needed. Okay.
It is, there is a lot that would fall into that position.
Okay.
And currently, yeah, a lot of that is me.
Okay.
In addition to all the other things.
No, I understand. All right, thank you.
Mr. Chair, but you do have a part-time, half-time increase in this staff. I don't know, you'll get to it, I just,
Oh, yeah, the one that was 19 hours now to 40.
Yeah, yeah.
I saw that.
and for the rationale.
So we've got, rationale in the written report here, but we're looking like 1.5 FTE increase is what I'm seeing.
Okay.
Would you like me to start with the
Yes,
Yeah.
let's talk some more on that. I think it's going to be the first of what probably we'll have discussions with every department in that we see in the requests coming forward, some release of pent-up demand. And what in some cases might be some right sizing or better sizing in terms of the needs. I think when we see the entire picture there, that's going to, result in some significance that we'll need to talk about how that's managed and accommodated. But definitely is seeing and recognizing the need, and so now discussions about how that's balanced across in a way that can be accommodated.
Yeah, so, in terms of the professional salaries, that is the reinstatement of our library assistant director, which was a position that we had up until about 2009. We had to make some budget cuts. That's when we lost our Monday morning hours and our Thursday evening hours. A couple of other staff positions were eliminated back then. At that time, they were library pages and they were free. So what I've given you, okay, you have this, when I get nervous, I make Canva documents.
Yep.
So you have this little Canva document here. I've given you, back in 2009, when we last had an assistant director, versus 2023, which was the last full year of numbers that I have. Just a sort of snapshot of not just what was spent, but it's meant to give you kind of an idea of how the library has evolved in terms of services offered, the number of programs that we do, the demand for certain services, computer use, and the number of different formats in which we offer collections. So in 2009, we only spent $268 on electronic content, which is probably a minuscule, it's probably 10 ebooks, versus 20,000 in 2023, which, goes into our consortial collection. So what you're getting for that $20,000 is something like $80-something thousand worth usage and several $1 million in that collection, because that's a very large collection. But each format, so ebooks, we still have print books, we have DVDs, we have electronic video, we have audiobooks, we have electronic downloadable audio, we have Hoopla and Canopy, which are collections that we sort of buy into and you get access to. Hoopla has hundreds of thousands of titles that are available. We still have CDs, we have magazines, we have e-magazines. So each one of these types of collections, in addition to all of our database subscriptions, LinkedIn Learning, Lendable, represent hours of staff time to select the materials, to budget appropriately. If it's a physical collection, processing those materials and getting them out to the public. If it's an electronic collection, making sure that it gets into, when you buy something for Overdrive, making sure that it gets in there, monitoring the licenses. So there could be 20 different models depending on the book. It's either one user, it could be simultaneous uses, it could be a certain number of checkouts and then you have to purchase it again, it could be a certain length of time. So it gets very confusing very quickly and it takes a lot to kind of manage that and make sure that the collection stays current. Some of that is done through our network membership, and some of it is done locally by us. With the electronic subscriptions, sometimes, like with Hoopla, for example, they're adding the content through Midwest Tape, which is the owner of the database, but we have to go in and make sure that some of that content meets our collection standards so that we don't find things that are not appropriate for a public library collection, which occasionally happens because they use clearinghouses to add content, and it's not always stuff that you would really want to see in a collection. So the administrative time that it takes to properly manage these things has gotten more complex. So it's the increased, like the back end time that it takes to make sure that all of these things are appropriate for the public and getting out to the public and promoting our resources and taking a look at our, making sure that our print marketing materials and our electronic marketing materials are all up to standard and that people actually know about the things that we offer them in the community. It takes a lot of work. At the same time, we're getting busier, with more people coming in. And while it's not, in 2009, I think we had a lot more people who would come in, find a book, check that out and leave. We're getting the same amount of foot traffic or even a little bit more, but they're not necessarily just using the collection. So they may be asking for computer help, or asking us to teach them how to use one of the apps that we have, or one of the resources that we have available. They're coming in for programs, they're coming in to study. Some of these things don't take a lot of staff intervention, and some of them take a significant amount. So the need for somebody at the administrative level has really increased. What ends up taking a back seat, since we will always prioritize our customers in front of us, is things like outreach, our Library on the Go program, which is, so if you are homebound and you can't leave your house for any reason, temporary injury or something more permanent, we do deliver books. And that is a program right now managed by a part-time staff member and run by 2 volunteers. So the demand for the program would require that we increase what we can offer, but we don't have the volunteers or the staff time to really do that correctly. So that's a program that we are almost afraid to even advertise too much, because if you advertise it and more people want to use it, then we don't have the resources to actually do it well. So that's, do you have any questions about the assistant director position, when I can move on to the
I mean, just one thing we talked about today, when I interviewed, we talked about succession planning, and there's not a lot of departments here that have a deep bench for additional people, and the organization is flat overall. So when you think holistically of the budget for the whole town of additions, you'll hear from the chief with, a supported addition of 2, one in the accountant's office, 1.5 here, and 1 in DPW. It's shared among the enterprise fund. So there's not, that's all there is for an additional staff in this entire budget. But when I interviewed, people talked a lot about, there's no succession planning in place. In a lot of these organizations, you can't move up. So the children's librarian, in my mind, leaves because there's no latitude. They can't.
I was just gonna
Yeah,
ask
no.
that question, yeah.
And the value, and I think of this from my office, right? We're trying to find ways to add value to the people who live here, not just doing the work that needs to be done and making sure we're transparent, but if we can save people money or add value. So you check out of the library, for example. Today, I don't know if it still works with CW Mars, but I was in the CW Mars community. You do the language app, for example. That's something somebody would download and pay for, subscription for $79 a year. And you can get it for free at the library. And, I mean, there's no administrative time there, I know that, but all those things you should be finding as a library, they may not find or introduce to the community because they're servicing, running programs, doing the day-to-day stuff. So that was kind of the justification behind it. And then comparatively to other communities, our sister communities, in terms of dollars spent per capita and staffing levels, you so below the benchmark. So that's why I supported the request, and that's why it's before you. But I wanted to give you 2 things. One, the whole picture of what the staffing increases would be, so you're not surprised by that as we go through. And it reaches another goal of what I heard from the interview process is succession planning, so we're not just kind of left, if Jen, God forbid, left and went someplace else, wanted to do some other career. What would we do? So that's my spiel on that.
total value of the databases as they were used in 2023. So all of our databases, including our Mango languages and LinkedIn Learning, they were used 11,021 times. The Mass Library Association actually assigns a value. They've done some amount of research. And so per use is $19.95. So the total value of, based on actual use of database usage, was $219,869. The total value of the collections that were used just by Northborough residents last year, and that includes our Overdrive ebook checkouts, as well as our physical collections and things that were made possible through our interlibrary loan system and our network membership, was $2,721,074. And when you look at what we're spending versus that number, it's pretty staggering. The total value of our collection, so our physical collections plus the total value of everything that's available in Overdrive, is $4,103,926, according to our network. And that does not include what's available in Canopy and Kubla, because they don't value their collection that way. So these were the numbers that I could get access to, but that's a huge amount of resources that people have available to them in the borough. I kept looking at the number. I looked at it for like an hour. It's like, there's no way it's that high. So the other staff increase is in the library assistant salary line. And that is half of the cost of increasing the adult services library assistant from 19 to 40 hours. Now, this was something that I had started working on with the previous town administrator. And that was modeled on an agreement that the library had made with the town administration previous to COVID to restore some hours to the library. So in the first year, the library would use donated funds to cover the entire cost of the salary increase. In the second year, it was gonna be a 50-50 split with the town. And then in the third year, the town would assume 100% funding for those increases. So that's what you're seeing right now, is half of the cost of what it is, of those 21 hours. And that was to kind of offset the impact of adding staff time onto our budget.
Toward that end, Jen, then next year,
Yes, so next year it
we'd
would.
see
Yes,
that second part of that increase.
yes.
Okay.
In addition to reinstating Monday hours, some of the other successes that we've had in being able to have that full-time position, we're able to process new physical materials much faster. So before this position was full-time, it took about 5 to 7 days to process new books when they came in. Now it takes about 2 days. So he's cranking through them, and that puts things in people's hands faster. And if you've ever seen somebody want the new James Patterson or the new Colleen Hoover, it makes a huge difference in how fast they're able to get that into their hands. He spends a lot of time with patrons that need one-on-one technology assistance. We were actually able to do some outreach technology days at the senior center. And he's able to sit one-on-one and show people how to use an app, how to download it, and doing basic internet searches and things like that. He's expanded our volunteer program, which, as I mentioned before, was one reason that we were able to get through the collection transition from Dewey to BISAC so quickly, even though 2 years doesn't sound quickly. He's trained 15 new volunteers in the last 6 months that are assisting in overhauling our adult collections, which is something that really desperately needed to happen. It was just something we never had time to do, which was properly weed out the books that were too old. So now we're in a good position to start transitioning that collection over next year. So we're way ahead of schedule for the upstairs because of those 15 volunteers. And we now actually get flyers out in advance of a program, and can send a weekly e-newsletter, and then he does all of the stuff with the Northborough Guide as well.
Okay.
So we actually send out 2 newsletters every week because of that permission.
Good
I'm
stuff.
gonna answer questions.
Yeah. Additional questions? Anything?
I think I'm good.
It reminds me, Jensine, I'm gonna look to make an appointment with you. I've got a couple programming ideas or creative ideas that I wanted to get your feedback on, so.
As long as there's a-
Seeing you tonight reminds me to schedule some time.
Absolutely.
Mr. Chair, I don't want to keep you long, but can you just talk about the state grant and how that funding works? Because
Yes.
you have an increase in the hook line, and you have to keep pace with something, but
Yes.
it might be good for the public to know what that is.
Yes, so in order to be considered certified through the state, we have to spend 15% of our total budget on materials. So, when you look at the line item increases for expenses, most of that increase is reflected to meet that 15%. What we would be able to spend more on is the electronic content, because that is so expensive and so confusing. So the majority of that would go
Makes-
right into.
Yeah, went into the non-print line,
Yeah,
okay.
right into it. And I think it's worth noting that the contractual services, is so our network membership for CW Mars is in there. We actually, the town only funds half of that total cost. We use the state aid that we receive through being certified through the state program, to pay for the other half of it, just to kind of mitigate the cost there. So our total
Okay,
cost
I see
for that
it.
membership is just over
The
33,000.
33, yeah. No, thanks for highlighting that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well done. Appreciate it.
Mr. Chair, you ready to move on to the Board of Health?
Board of Health, or Health
I
Department,
wanna just preface this if I may.
absolutely.
As you may know, we've been doing a study with Family Youth Services.
Yes.
CMRPC.
I was gonna ask about
That
this.
study's almost complete. We're supposed to have a debrief on that on Friday. So Isabella took over for Kristen Black as the interim health director. She's been amazing thus far. I have no reason to doubt it.
You sound like there was
There's a
a
wall.
cliff coming.
Incredible.
Not yet.
I needed some levity tonight, it's very, very serious. But it's funny, you might see a theme here relative to social services and all these departments.
Yep.
We're all kind of providing similar services when it comes to social services to different categories of people. So that's why we did the study. We had a suspicion, even before I got here, that there was some cross-pollination that could happen to get a better service model. So that's what CMRPC is studying, to see if a merger between Family Youth Services, which has been vacant for a year, give or take, that Board of Health or the Health Department's been picking up the slack for that. So they're trying to model it to see what the recommendation should be to the board and to the Board of Health, the Select Board and the Board of Health. So from a budget perspective, we are presenting just the health budget tonight, but just know that Family Youth Services, if it was to be merged under Health and Human Services, it would be one budget. But because we're not there yet with the recommendation, I just wanted to make that clear. So, Isabella, so.
Does anyone have any questions about that first? About this?
Coming in tonight, I was gonna ask, where things were in terms of the schedule around the study and that findings.
We have a joint meeting on the 18th. Well, we haven't scheduled it. We're planning to schedule it. We need to ask a lot of parties to be a part of a meeting on the 18th to hear the proposal. Our goal budgetarily is to keep the numbers flat. So if it's merged, it'll be the same number.
The sum of
as
the two, yeah.
both departments if they were separate.
Yep.
There are some synergies doing it, but I'll let the report do what it was supposed to do and speak to that. Can I hand this up to you?
Yes.
I'm the interim health director. It's nice to meet you both and see you, Scott. So to start, I'll just go over some of our accomplishments and the priorities that continue. So the Northborough Health Department successfully was awarded the CDC Drug-Free Communities Grant. So that's a 5-year grant for $125,000 per year, and we have the option to reapply for years 6 through 10. So through that grant, which is through the Encompass Coalition, which is Northborough, Southborough, Preventing Youth Substance Use, we hired a full-time DFC coordinator. So she's a town of Northborough employee. She started in December, and she has been phenomenal. So that has been great. So she's a town of Northborough employee. She works with Northborough, Southborough, the coalition, as well as directly with the school system. So hopefully we are going to engage in the schools. She can be there 1 day a week and do some more youth programming. So that's the one big success so far. And then we have our continued regional grant. So we are part of the Greater Boroughs Partnership for Health, which is a public health excellence grant between Boylston, Northborough, Southborough, and Westborough. So this is a very large grant, so it's $500,000, and it provides us most of our staffing. So we have almost, I think, 2 FTE nursing, 1 health inspector, and then in my other role, epidemiologist and shared service coordinator. So that's where you get the bulk of our staff, and we work for the 4 towns. So just to highlight some of the great work that our nurses have done. So in Northborough alone, we've done 58 wellness checks. So that's checking with seniors. They sign up for them. They either are more social or more medical. It's really up to them. We do blood pressure clinics at the senior center twice a week. So already we have this interdisciplinary and departmental work. We've done 18 Narcan trainings, and with that we've given out 500 doses of Narcan. So we get that free through the state. It's the Narcan, sub-steroid Narcan program, so we get those free, and we do trainings at least once a month in the communities.
Thank goodness I haven't had to use mine,
Good, but you haven't.
but I haven't. Yep.
And then this past fall, we did 4 vaccine clinics in Northborough, as well as partnering with Wegmans at the senior center to offer the high-dose senior vaccine. And along with that, so 400 vaccines for flu. Unfortunately, we did not do COVID-19 vaccines this winter and fall because of the way the prescription worked. It was no longer free for us, and we did 20 homebound flu vaccines. So that's when the seniors requested the flu vaccine to be done at their home. So our public health nurse did 20 in Northborough. And then aside from nursing, we have 4 sunscreen dispensers at the 2 parks, and that was through a partnership with Impact Melanoma. So that was very exciting this summer. And then Michael is doing phenomenal on all the inspections, and Kristen and Michael passed the tobacco regs in July of 2023. So that is kind of just all of the shared services that we can accomplish with the grant and the staff. And I guess I'll talk a little bit about opioid settlement funds. So we're working continuously this year and next year, and until we have a plan for this money, to figure out how to incorporate community feedback. So that's a requirement of the opioid settlement funds. So we are going to try to use grant money to create or conduct a strategic plan. So that will be upcoming. And then I will end with the emergency shelter. As many of you know, in July, Northborough opened a emergency shelter. We had 100 families, 30 families, 100 individuals, and we continue to be the lead primary contact for that shelter. We now have 22 families and 80 individuals, and we provide all of the support along with the CMHA, which is a organization which is a service provider for homeless shelters. So about more than 80% of the adults are employed right now, so it's very exciting. It's been a fast and furious 7 months, but we wouldn't be able to do it without all of these volunteers, different departments, the senior center. Our families went to the trick-or-treat. Our families go to the library. They have all this language classes, so it's really it's been a huge town effort, and I can't thank everyone enough. So that being said, our budget, as Tim said, is staying pretty much the same, besides just some COLA increases. The side with the blue shapes, it just shows how much we get from the general fund, and then our 3 grants that are really just critical to our health department. So that's where, again, we're getting most of our staff and most of our services. So I guess I'll stop rambling and see if there's any questions.
Isabel, on the regional grant,
Mhm.
what's the, like, the renewal, or the out years of the renewal?
Yeah, so it's renewed every year. They're trying to make that an every 3-year process, but it's a long-term grant, so they haven't given us kind of a deadline.
So it looks like that will be in place for a while.
Yeah, more than 10 years.
That's great.
And then the DFC one is at least 5 years, at most 10 years.
I've kind of missed you guys. It's been a while.
You're welcome.
I need to go, I need to get back to getting, to working with you. Any questions on programming or budget?
So again, you see these are renewable grants,
Yes.
so there's nothing that's going to, no grant that's going to drop off in the next couple of years.
As long as we keep doing grant management, which I will add, and you'll hear from Connor, it's a huge role of this health director role. So just to think about that for the health and human service model.
In terms of opportunities to hire then a health director, anything in the pipeline, candidates, recruiting?
Well,
Not that I
candidates-
want to see
candid-
Isabella
candidates,
go away.
yes, but when whichever model we choose, that's when we would actually go out and advertise for whichever position we want to hire for.
Gotcha. So in terms of actively recruiting for a replacement health director, kind of paused on that to see the results of? Okay, thank you. Thank you. Lisa, you had a question?
Yes, I was just gonna ask you about the 20 families that are left. When last we heard, they were actually, many of them were finding homes. How are we with that?
So 21 out of the 22 families have been accepted into the home-based program, which is a state program, and it gives them $30,000 over a 2-year period. So right now, they are still looking for affordable apartment complexes or condos that the landlord will accept this program, the home-based program. So that has been a challenge, but they have all been accepted.
Okay, so basically that's still gonna go in here for the winter then,
Right.
and you really don't have a date on.
Not a date, the state has played around with like April, May, but no final date. And CMHA will continue to help find apartments.
Okay. And is there anything left for us to be doing down there all the time? or-
So I meet with the staff about weekly, so we have the full-time interpreter and a full-time community coordinator, and those are CMHA staff, or they pay for the staff. So I meet with them regularly just to make sure the health department, is fully engaged. They're doing so well.
Okay, that's good. And is the National Guard
The
involved?
National
in
Guards
that?
are still there, they're very helpful, and they will continue until the day they close the shelter.
Great, thanks so much.
So it sounds like things are ramping down in terms of
Ramping down
our
the state,
resources.
Yes, definitely the state is consolidating a lot of sites, but Northborough will continue. Just this week, we've gotten like 15 kids a pediatric dentist appointment, so we're still working hard to
Yep.
figure out how to help them in any way possible. The playroom is still set up. The kids and family they're doing so well. We have a bus that comes Thursday and Saturday, and the bus takes them to local plazas and also the library, so thanks to Jen. And they do, English language classes at the library on Saturday. There's programming through RAP, which is the Worcester Refugee Association. So they're busy,
Excellent.
and we're busy.
All right. Thank you very much,
Okay, thank you.
not only for the presentation, but for everything the department is doing
Of course.
and associated departments. Next up, representing one side of public safety, police department.
I like that.
Welcome, Chief Griffin.
Thank
First
you very
time
much.
I've had the chance to say that in a recorded session. Feels kind of
Appreciate
good.
it, Appreciate it.
Yeah, congratulations, Chief.
Thanks, Bob, appreciate it. Next year I'll know to have a
PowerPoint or some handouts for you folks. So I got my training wheels on this ride.
We want the,
So-
the themed colors and the animation.
Yeah, I know, I'm all about that. It was very nice. It was nice to see what they did to present. And I think I'm gonna do a lot of talking, but I think for next year, I'll give you some more things to actually look at, because I'm a visual person, so.
We'd love to get it in advance.
Okay, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So just to give you a little bit of a recap of the police department from last year until present, I'm gonna kind of jump around a little bit, but as most of you know, Chief Bill Liver retired on December 31st of 2023. He was 40 years service to the police department. He had a couple of years with the fire department prior to that. So all in all, it was about 44 years of service, and I owe him a lot for mentoring me and putting in some really nice words to the Board of Selectmen, which helped me go forward to be your next chief. So on January 1st of this year, I was promoted to police chief and was sworn in at a ceremony at the library, which was well attended on January 2nd. It was a great event, surrounded by a lot of townspeople and family and friends. As I wrote a little bit about this, I was really proud to say that we are currently at full staff, but then I forgot. We're not quite at full staff because Bill Liver retired, which means there's a vacancy. So we're almost at full staff. But yesterday, that job opening did go out publicly, so we do have a job opening for a police officer at the moment. So we'll be taking applications. So, assuming that position gets filled relatively soon, I'm hoping by early April, that would be my goal, to mid-April, we would have 31 full-time employees. That's myself, 1 lieutenant, 6 sergeants, 15 police officers, 1 communications supervisor, 6 dispatchers, and a administrative assistant. That's what we are at when we're at full staff. We haven't been at full staff in years. I couldn't tell you, maybe 5, 6, 7 years for that number. During the COVID times, we had a couple officers retire to pursue other professions. It was a tough time over the last couple of years. And there was a lot of strain placed on our officers, having to work overtime, forced overtime, things of that nature. So, knock on wood, in a couple of months, I'm hoping that we will be at full staff. And we have a great staff. We always have. A lot of our recent hires, we hired 2 police officers last year in January of 2023, and they were young and right out of college, and went to the police academy for 6 months. And after the police academy, they have to do a field training observation for another 10 to 12 weeks. And they're now, actually they're both working tonight, and they're doing really well. And just within the last couple of weeks, we hired a dispatcher, a vacancy that we also had open. We found our last 2 hires at dispatcher that have been wonderful hires, both with extensive experience. They came over from Worcester Police, and leaving the city to come to I call it the country club for them. But they were wonderful hires, so we're very fortunate to have them on board recently. I'm happy to report that this year, in 2023 to 2024 school year, we have a full-time school resource officer in our schools again. That position, it wasn't eliminated, but it was a position due to our staffing needs we couldn't fulfill. We needed people in cruisers and boots on the ground, and we just didn't have the staffing to fill that position, much needed position. We were still able to respond when needed to the schools. We had the
school resource officer at the time, again, was put back into the patrol division. But he was available during the days and would go there and assist when needed. But I am happy to let everyone know, because I'm a former school resource officer myself. It's a critical position, it's a much-needed position, and we have Detective Steve Sullivan, who's in that position right now, and he is just doing a fantastic job. Everybody loves Steve, and he's not only, I was up there a couple of weeks ago at the high school for an event, and he's only been in the role since September, and the amount of kids who he knew by first name was amazing. And I had that role many years ago, and I thought I was pretty good, and I had done it like 3 or 4 years, getting to know kids. And Steve's learned their names in like 3 or 4 months. It was remarkable, and they were coming up to Steve and giving him fist bumps. You know, I mean, think back 20 or 30 years ago, you know, you wouldn't have seen that interaction with a police officer and kids. It was different, but it's different today in a much positive way. So Steve's going around fist bumping kids, making connections, and keeping our schools safe. So I am very happy about that. We introduced a drone program this year into our patrol division. We have 3 officers that have their certifications to fly the drone. And I should have pulled the numbers, but we've deployed it probably in the past year, probably about a dozen times for various incidents. Most significant incident was the Mount Pisgah wildfire, where we deployed the drone to assist the fire department to locate hot spots and things like that. It was deployed the other night for a missing juvenile. As soon as we had a report that the child was missing, the sergeant called for the drone. A couple of years ago, we would be calling for canines immediately. And I know Chief Liver has spoken in the past about canines, and they're hard to find because not a lot of departments have them. But the drone, we've found that they've been pretty successful in things like locating people, fires. So it wasn't a big expense. You know, the drone itself, it was a couple $1,000s. We bought it a few years ago. And to get the officers trained, you know, there was some expense with that. And if we need an officer to operate the drone, and if they're not working, we will call them in on overtime and pay them overtime. So for instance, the incident the other night with the missing juvenile, the sergeant called for the drone. One of our 3 drone operators happened to be working that shift. He went back to the station, got the drone, launched the drone. The child was located, fortunately, before the drone found him, and it was a good ending. But it's really a nice tool to have, and it doesn't cost a lot. Unlike a canine, where there's a lot more expenses, this seems to be working well for us. Feel free to interrupt at any time I'm talking a lot. Could you go through you kind of went through the positions, and I missed the middle kind of thing.
A number of
1
staff.
lieutenant, 6 sergeants.
Oh, we have, I'm sorry, 1 chief, that's me. 1 lieutenant, we have 6 sergeants, 15 police officers, a communication supervisor, 6 dispatchers, and 1 administrative assistant.
Okay.
Yep.
Those would be, I had the chief down, I didn't.
Sorry, I was speaking too fast. So that's about the drone program. Recently, we've implemented an employee wellness program. This was brought to my attention by one of my sergeants, Sergeant Mike Bissett. It's a great thing that he's slowly developing. Is basically checking in on each other, checking in on our people. So many times, our job is to help other people, but not many people check in on us. And and it's in my budget. There's a program out there that Mike has researched, and it's a online resource that provides first responders with easy, confidential access to
all sorts of services for them. It can help with post-traumatic stress. It can help with off-the-job type issues. You know, we've had experiences. We've had officers dealing with issues when they come across things. And it's nice to have another resource out there. So this program, it's about $10,000. And we're gonna, well, I'm asking for it, right? It's part of the contractual services, and I'll touch upon it when I go through the budget. It's about $10,000, and we'll reevaluate it to see what people think, but it's also gonna be hard to kind of evaluate since it's a confidential thing. But it's a tool that we hope that if they need it, it's there for them. The employee assistance services that's offered through towns, it's okay. This is just a little more confidential. There's just some stigma that goes along with police stress, and for them to go on their phone and touch an app to talk to someone, I think is a great idea. So Sergeant Bissett's kind of overseeing implementing this program. I've recently assigned a sergeant to oversee our traffic program. This is something that's never really been assigned before. Sergeant Jeremy Treffry is kind of looking at traffic and traffic issues, motor vehicle accidents, motor vehicle enforcement. He's going to be our go-to for these type of things. Right now, traffic's a big issue in town, and I think I would attribute that to a lot of our recent development over the last 10 years as far as business goes. You know, and with business, which is great for a lot of reasons, comes traffic and many other issues, but traffic in particular. So we have, you know, a plan when, you know, a neighbor has an issue with whether it's a speeding cars on their street or concerns about a particular roadway, and Jeremy's going to be the one that kind of addresses it on our end and assign our officers to the problem areas. Just this week, I appointed 2 officers to serve in the position of senior liaison officers. Sergeant Tom McDonald and Officer Connor Henry volunteered for this position. I've talked a lot about schools and resources for young people, but I felt that we were missing a big population in town, and that's our seniors. So my plan behind this is they're going to be our link to the senior population. They're going to be out visiting the senior center. They're going to get to know if there's any concerns, maybe it's cognitive issues, driving issues, seniors who have fallen victim to scams, and they're going to be our eyes and ears and our link to that population. I've spoken with the senior center director and the board of health, Isabella, and they're aware of it, so we can all kind of be on the same page. I think it's going to be a good thing. And I was up at the senior center recently, and I spoke to some people about this, and the people up there were very much in favor of this. So both these officers grew up in town, have a lot of connections in town, and I think it should be a good thing for the town. We are really close to having a mental health clinician back on board with our department. This has been a vacant position. We do not pay for this position. This is through the advocates. The advocates pay for the position, and we share this position with Southborough Police. Westboro, we used to be with Westboro too, and they went a different way. Unfortunately, it's a tough position to fill. This is a mental health counselor who rides in a police car, usually between 2 p.m. and 10 p.m. and he or she responds to calls of service with the officers. And if there's if she's in Northborough tonight, and Southborough has an incident, a crisis of some sort, where a counselor would be helpful, we will bring her over to Southborough, and vice versa. So we've had this program for a few years. However, the two counselors that we've had in the past have left for other professions. One actually became a police officer, and we lost a good one. It's a unique position. That's why it's been hard to fill, because people who go into that profession don't necessarily sign up thinking they're going to be riding in a police car all day. But it is it's a needed position. It's a well-used position. When we've had these clinicians in the past, it takes a lot of, it's a relief as a police officer. You know, our police officers are counselors in a lot of ways, and but yet we're not really trained like a true clinician. So to have that person at our side, and it's not always, you know, it could be a mental health crisis. We use them for if there is if somebody has passed away and we're on the scene. You know, we'll use them time to console people. Very nice position to have, and I'm hoping we're real close to getting it. I'm really close. I believe it's going to happen. So we're doing some background work on it now, but we have an applicant, and we like this person. So in September, the Massachusetts Police Accreditation Commission came in for 3 days to conduct their on-site assessment of our department. We successfully received our 7th accreditation award, and were presented with the award earlier this past month. We were the 8th department in the state to become accredited back in the early 2000s. Now there are over 125 police departments in the state that have that accreditation. Basically, before I became chief, that was my job. I was the accreditation manager, and honestly, since January of last year until September, I worked probably 40 hours a week on getting ready for that assessment. And I'll talk about that in a little bit as I talk about the lieutenant's position and a request I have. It's a demanding job. It's an important to be accredited means a lot. It means we have the policies, we have a blueprint as to how we should be doing our jobs, and we do it. We follow the rules, we follow the blueprint, but we then have to prove it to the commission that we're doing what we're saying we're doing. So very demanding, especially in policing in 2023 or 24. 3 weeks ago, we launched our new website, which has received very positive response from our residents. It's www.northboroughpd.com. Pretty simple. It's actually been on the back of our cruisers, like in a logo, for a number of years, but it never really brought you anywhere. So this is an exciting website. It looks really nice. And it's I think if you check it out, I think you'll be pretty pleased. We're learning to manage it ourselves, and I've personally never had any past experience working behind the scenes of a website, so I'm learning that a little bit. But we also have like a social media team that's also a part of it. Speaking of social media, we're very active. We're very active on our social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. However, we can communicate with the public, and you know, I want to show all the positive we do, and that's a lot of the point behind our social media. It's reaching out to the public, showing them this is who's out there working, and this is what they're doing, and most of what you see on our Facebook page is going to be positive things. Last night, we hosted a pasta dinner for veterans as part of Kindness Week, which was a couple of weeks ago. I think I had this idea of trying to do something during Kindness Week that was a little unique. So many times, the veterans, you know, we pay tribute to them during Memorial Day and Veterans Day, and then, you know, there's this long break, and I think the long winter months are sometimes lonely and cold, and we said, let's do a pasta party on a Wednesday night in February. So that's what we did. The Police Association paid for it. We had close to 100 veterans and their spouses last night at the American Legion, and it was a lot of fun, and we hope to make this an annual event. If you sense like where I'm coming from, I'm big into community. I'm a big believer in community policing and community outreach. And as chief, that's my mission, is to continue that. And if, you know, however we can get out there in a positive way, we're going to do it. Next year, or within this year, one of my goals is to bring a comfort dog to the police department. And Mrs. Height, I watched an appropriations meeting last night. I was reviewing some past meetings just so I knew what I was doing a little bit. And I watched one from a couple years ago when Bill Lyra was talking about this, and you and Bill had a talk about Bill wanted the dog under his desk, and you said you had one for him. And so Bill also mentioned at that time about bringing an actual canine, a working dog. I don't need a canine. I'll be honest with you, and I don't see down the road that I'll need a canine. We just, as I told you about the drone. If we need a canine, the state police, our neighboring towns do have them. I just don't see the need. We don't really need it. We wouldn't use it enough. And therefore, I don't think there's a need. And as chief, I'm not going to ask for things that I don't need. And I don't need a German Shepherd. What I do think might happen is a comfort dog. And if you told me 10 years ago that I'd be asking for a comfort dog, I'd be like, well, what the heck's a comfort dog? I've done a lot of research, and I know they're extremely popular today. But the comfort dog, whether it be a lab or a golden retriever or a golden doodle, it brings people together. There's some therapy behind it, not only for the community. It would break some barriers between the police and the public. It's a good public relation tool, and again, it's also would be good for my officers to have a dog in stressful situations, to get back and debrief and have a dog there. So last year, the year before, as part of the Be Well program, which I was kind of on that working group, which was ARPA money, there was some money earmarked for a comfort dog. And at that time, we had staffing issues, and we wanted one, but at the time it wasn't right. So I have to ask Tim where that couple $1,000s is. It may have been $3,000, but it's gonna probably pay for itself, to be honest with you, if we were to get one. And again, there is money there somewhere for it. A lot of these breeders will donate the dog itself. The training sometimes is free. So we're gonna look into to introducing that. Hopefully this time next year we have a dog with us for this meeting. I'm sorry for talking a lot. All right. On to the budget. Yeah, just briefly, in our capital budget this year, I'm asking for 2 police cars. And that's, as you know from past years, that's pretty standard. We either ask for 2 cars or a 3-car year, based on our plan, our 10-year plan, and how we rotate them out. This year is a 2-car year. I'm going to be asking the capital for the 2024's Ford Explorers. This will be a gas model. We have 4 hybrid vehicles right now that we absolutely love, and I'm a big fan of the hybrid vehicles. If you could tell me tomorrow that go ahead and buy 2 more of them, I would do it in a heartbeat. The problem is, like, the motor vehicle industry just has not caught up, and we're getting cars right now that we bought 2 years ago. We're just getting them. So the hybrids, particularly are extremely, extremely difficult to purchase right now. I was told, once again, I just double checked this week to make sure I wasn't missing anything. I said on July 1st, if I were to get the money for these two hybrids, when would I see it? He said probably a year and a half. So he goes, I can get you the gas. I can get you the gas. So I'm going to ask for the gas because we need cars on the road. That would not be ideal. My plan would be go for hybrids. I just can't get them. My other plan is to be somewhat uniformity and consistent with our vehicle purchasing. In mid-2012, 14, when Crown Victoria was stopped being produced, we decided to try three different types of vehicles. We tried the Chevy Tahoe, the Dodge Charger, and the Ford Explorer. And we tried them because our officers are all different sizes. We have big officers, we have small officers. So what car do you all like? You're going to be in it for 8 hours a day. What do you all like? And the general consensus is it's the Explorer, which is what they call the police interceptor. So that's what we're going to kind of go with going forward for our patrol vehicles. Our administrative vehicles might change a little bit. They could be Chevy or Dodge, but for the patrol cars, you're going to see Fords out there. And it should also be noted that myself, along with the town planner, we are on a working group, working with the National Grid fleet, electric fleet group. I don't know what they call themselves. Basically to explore down the road if it's feasible. Does it make sense for us to maybe try an electric vehicle? I think a lot of probably police chiefs would put the absolute foot down and say, no, absolutely not, give me gas all day. I at least want to listen to see, would this make sense? Could we convert a detective vehicle or a lieutenant's vehicle that's not out on the road 16 hours a day? Could we think about it? And if we were able to do that, what's the cost? What are we going to need for infrastructure as far as charging stations? So we just started talking with National Grid. They have the inventory of my fleet, and they're going to kind of do an analysis, and I just want to learn a little bit. I just don't know enough about it, but I'm not saying no. So that's it in a nutshell as to the year a little bit. I think it's time to go through the budget itself. So if we go through salaries, I'm going to go down a little bit, and the majority of this is contractual, raises, and you're going to see the chief's salary. It obviously looks like it was a big jump. I just want to explain that a little bit. If Chief Liver was here today, he would be making the same amount of money. Why you see a large percent increase is because it used to be broken down differently, where his educational incentive was not included in his overall salary. Correct? Fair to say? It's okay. I just want to explain it right.
So
You just took it out of a different line.
We took it out of a different line item.
It was combined with all the officers and
Right.
sergeants' pay.
And when we were discussing my contract, I said, why don't we just say what I'm actually making? And so my educational incentive is it's built right in there. So that's essentially what that is. Sergeant salaries, you're going to see a decrease, and I'm going to explain that in a minute, I think, because I'm going to be asking for a second lieutenant tonight. And basically what that, we're not going to be adding a body. It's just going to be removing a sergeant and promoting a sergeant to lieutenant. So I'll explain that more in a minute. In the patrolman salaries, patrol officer salaries, obviously it's a jump, and that's because I'm going to be asking for one additional officer tonight, and I'll explain that a little more in some detail. And therefore, the lieutenant salary, as I said, is double because I'm asking for a second lieutenant. I think I'm gonna just turn the mic over to Jason for a minute to explain dispatcher salaries and our dispatcher overtime. So, because I think Jason might explain this best because there's a grant involved or was involved.
Okay, so I would put it this way, we're trying to make an improvement in terms of transparency with the budget, and just like the chief's salary line, where the educational incentive was hidden down below and the education incentive mixed with other employees, it's moved it to the chief's line. Annually, we get what's called the 911 grant, or maybe that's the old title for it, I forget what it's
The
called now.
incentive.
And there's various components of it, but we usually get about $60,000 a year, and it's a claim that we put into the state for the state grant to get reimbursed for dispatcher salaries and their overtime for training. Typically, we budget in full for the dispatchers, and we don't account for this grant. And Brian's budget here takes account for us, assuming we're going to be getting the grant. We've gotten the grant every single year that I've
Since
worked here.
2010,
Yeah.
at least, yeah.
For some time. So, there is, I guess, a degree of risk, because we don't find out until the summer that we've gotten the grant, till August, well into the next fiscal year, but there's, like the chief said, it's been since 2010 that this grant program's been in place, and very likely that is gonna happen again. So I hope that.
Yeah, so in terms of the line items we see here, we see the reduction on dispatcher salary and the increase on overtime. So what's the split in terms of the grant impact?
Yeah, so typically what would happen would be that the chief would buy needed equipment at the end of the year when it was determined how much surplus he had in the budget. So we are planning out more judiciously where those expenditures are going to be before the end of the year.
So you're expecting more overtime for the dispatchers? In general?
Yes, I think that instead of running the line over, we're trying to accurately
Yeah.
record what it's gonna be.
Okay.
We generally go way over on overtime for dispatchers.
So the number that you were before was always below.
Exactly,
Okay.
yep.
Basically underreported in prior years.
Yes.
Is, the model might not be exactly right, but if you know, from the outside, I'd say, oh, we're spending this much in dispatcher overtime, do we need to increase staff with another dispatcher?
It's something to definitely talk about, and I'm gonna look into for next year. Yeah, it's a question I've asked myself recently.
Yeah, you have to look at it though, yeah, you can't
Right.
say you're gonna hire someone.
Right, yeah, exactly. So, it's a great question. Okay, to move on? Moving down on the salaries, you'll see an increase of in-service training from $10,000 to $15,000. In-service training, that is when an officer goes away to training on overtime. So they're on a day off and they get assigned to go, or they have to go because it's part of their mandatory training, and that pays for that. My plan is I would like to get, a lot of our training today is done online, which is good and bad. It's good because it doesn't cost us a lot. It's bad because it's online. It's bad because it's online, and there's just something about being in front of an instructor that our officers are missing, not only in my opinion, but from what feedback they're giving me. So I do want to try to get some people leaving the office a little bit more, getting away from the keyboard and actually going out, learning in person and networking, which a lot of them miss the network of meeting other police officers or attorneys. So that would be the ask there.
I hear you, I'm in that boat.
Yeah. Well, I think you're starting to see it in the business world where they're asking people to come back a little bit to the office, you know, so. Any more questions on the salaries or, yes?
Well, I'm just looking at, you know, there's a pretty big increase kind of
Yep.
thing across there.
Yep.
And it's kind of hard to understand it from the way things move around in the lines, as you put it, kind of thing, of how it's broken down. If you look at the $300,000 increase there roughly, what's driving it? What are the big pieces that are,
Yeah.
because this is a big number.
Sure, absolutely. So I think there's a couple things. One is an added position.
Okay.
All right, so, and if I could have a minute just to explain that and the need for that. And it was basically, I don't like to read verbatim, but sometimes it's helpful, so if you wouldn't mind, if I just
Sure.
have a
Okay.
memo that was
Yeah.
prepared. We've always done a lot with a little. Since I've started here, we've been at about, give or take, 20 to 22 officers. And I've been on the job starting my 24th year. So I started in the year 2000. And we're at around 20, 21 officers. The population hasn't grown tremendously in Northborough in those 20 years. Couple thousand, I believe. I think when I started here, it was right around 13,000, and we're about 16,000. What has grown is business. What hasn't grown is us. And with business, with traffic, comes issues. From the time they built Northborough Crossing, 12 years ago, I think we were told we were gonna get 6 officers, and we didn't see anyone out of that. We are up there constantly for shoplifting, motor vehicle crashes, you name it, we're up there a lot. Go down Bartlett Street, look at all those warehouses. Go on Barefoot Road, look at those warehouses, the industry. Northborough daytime population, I don't know how you can figure that out. I don't know. But it's busy. It's got to be double the evening population. So with that growth over the last couple of years, we haven't experienced much growth at all, minus 1 or 2 officers. The FBI, they can throw out some numbers, right, what you should be staffed at, right? They say we should be at 2.4 officers per 1,000 people. We're at 1.4 officers per 1,000 people. There's times where we only have 2 officers working a shift. That's not good. It doesn't happen a lot, but it can happen. So if an officer is assigned to work the midnight shift and there's 3 of them working and one decides to take a vacation day, we're down to 2 officers. It's not safe. It's really, it's not efficient. We could have a domestic call up on Green Street, which requires at least 2 officers. And then you have a motor vehicle crash at Route 9 and Route 20, and we're calling for mutual aid for another town. So it's pretty archaic right now. We really do need more. I'd love to say right now, I need 5 more. I do need more. I'm coming tonight asking for 1. It's a start. I would like to come back here in the future and maybe ask for 1 next year. But it's a start to ask for 1 this year. I just want to let you know, like, not surrounding towns, but towns in our general population in the state of Massachusetts and how many officers they have at, just so you can kind of know. Auburn, 16,000 people, 16,800 people, they have 43 officers. Let's see, Clinton, 15,347 people, they have 28 officers. Duxbury, 16,000 people, 28 officers. East Long Meadow, 16,000 people, 27 officers. East Hampton, 16,000 people, 38 officers. Holliston, 14,000 with 25 officers. North Reading, 15,000 people with 33 officers. And I'll give you one more close comparison, would be Swampscott, 15,000 people with 28 officers. And we're at 15,647 people with 23 officers. Yeah, Bob?
Yeah, I understand the plight. I think what would help us, too, to rationalize this is, like, we usually get, like, a report, like, how many crimes are being committed. You got shoplifting, okay? Show us the ramp up that'll help us rationalize a lot of this too.
Yep.
That you need help.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah,
So.
number of calls, things like that.
Sure, and we see that ramp up and we say, yeah, looks like he got a good point, and that
Sure.
backs us up.
Yeah, I have the 2023 numbers here. I can certainly do a comparison. Over the last, I can give you the comparison. But I think those numbers will reflect what I'm asking for. But I'm also just, even if those numbers weren't there, I still think we're a big enough town, both during the nighttime, meaning general population, in the daytime, that we need more officers out on the road, especially in today's day and age. We have 10,000 shoppers at Northborough Crossing, maybe that's a high number, but let's say 5,000 people up there during Christmas, and I have 2 officers working. It could be a peaceful day that day, but I still only have 2 officers working. I'll be happy to share with you folks, and I can email it. Is that how it's typically done?
I didn't need
Okay.
it today, but I mean,
Yeah,
it's
that'd
like,
be fine.
even in the future, it would be nice to see that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Progression.
Absolutely. I think that's a great suggestion, and I will make note of that.
Thank you.
For next time. But I do have we had 18,000 incidents last year, overall calls for service. That's just off
Yeah.
the top of my head, but I can break it down. So
Okay.
it's 1,000 more than the year before.
Yeah, I know, you got domestic violence issues, you got.
Arrest, 175 arrests
Something up
last year.
this hill,
Yeah, absolutely. So that is my request for the extra
Okay,
volume.
so that's part of the 300,000, right? What else is in there?
Where's, I'm looking at the 300,000.
It's the total, it's the change in your personnel.
Oh, is that 300?
It's really the overtime, it's about 60,000, another 100,000 for the extra lieutenant, so that's 160 of it. And
Okay.
contractual service is another 20. So, those are the big ones I see on here. General overtime, another 20 there.
You want me to go through the
So-
expenses too, George?
No, actually, your expenses are practically the
You
same.
know,
as
yeah,
last
the
year.
expenses stayed really low.
Right.
I just would like to highlight a couple things, if you wouldn't mind. on-
Okay,
on
but then
that.
could we come back, I just want to make sure I understand
Yep.
what's driving that.
Sure. An increase in repair and maintenance. That's I'm asking for a little bit more there. Obviously, our camera system right now in our station is not good. It's on part of the capital plan to replace it. But anytime one of our cameras go down, it's about a $2,000 repair. We have cameras on all of our cells, all of our interview areas. So if a camera goes down on one of the cells, we cannot put a detainee in there without a camera on them or her. So it's a liability issue. So that's driving that price up. The contractual services, basically, as you know, everything's just gone up a little bit in life today. Chief Liver always joked, one of our numbers here is called unclassified. Unclassified are things that just really don't fit into a category. Those are prisoner meals and interpreter services
Yeah.
and laundry services. We have to wash the prisoners' blankets. And he would always, whenever we would turn in a receipt, he'd go, I can't believe I'm paying $15 for a prisoner's breakfast. What are they getting? A filet mignon. So it's just the cost of
You
food.
can't get out of McDonald's for
No,
$15 anymore.
Exactly. So, but going back to your question, so anyways, the expenses did not go up a lot. The second lieutenant, I just want to reference that. And again, it's kind of a memo that I had written. Excuse me 1 second. So, like the numbers I gave you with area departments and or populations our size, our command structure is not the way it should be set up right now. As I said, it's myself and 1 lieutenant. That position is vacant because we're trying to hire someone. We're having a promotional test for lieutenant in about a month. So again, that's my old spot. Most departments around us have a better structure, and in my opinion, a much-needed structure, and I just want to explain that a little bit to you. My request is to add a second lieutenant's position. It's not a new body, it's just a different title. We have 6 sergeants right now. One of our sergeants is what we would refer to as an administrative sergeant. He's in charge of, he's our court prosecutor, and he's in charge of our fleet, and he does a host of other things, but he's not answering calls typically. I mean, he can, but that's just really not his assignment. My plan is to eliminate that position and promote that position to lieutenant. I'm not saying it's gonna be him, because there's a process that they have to apply for and go through an interview process. And here's my rationale behind it. This is not a new idea. Chief Liver has mentioned it. It's just, I don't think ever made it to this table before. But I know there were memos to our past town administrator, and I don't think it ever reached you folks. So it's not necessarily my idea. I'm 100% behind it, but this is, we've been talking about this for a while. Recently increased managerial demands as a result of the Criminal Justice Reform Bill in 2020, and the Massachusetts Police Accreditation Commission has placed a tremendous amount of added work for one lieutenant. The Reform Act also created the Peace Officer Standards and Training Commission, also known as Post-C. The commission is tasked with tremendous responsibility and has been given significant authority to regulate every aspect of policing, including certifying or decertifying officers or entire agencies. The added training, documentation, compliance, and ongoing policy and regulation changes alone justify this added position. More importantly, it will allow the current lieutenant and myself to realign duties and responsibilities in efficient and effective management of the department. The intent is to have an administrative lieutenant and an operations lieutenant to balance workload more evenly and efficiently. And just to give you some ideas as to some of our surrounding towns, Worcester County Metro West, like their structure a little bit and their population. Westboro's at about 21,000 people. They have a chief, they have a deputy chief, and they have 2 lieutenants. Hudson, 19,000 people. They have a chief, they have a captain, and they have a lieutenant. Holden, about 18,000 people, 1 chief, 2 lieutenants. Charlton, 13,000 people, 1 chief, a deputy chief, and a lieutenant. Auburn, 17,000 people, a chief, a deputy chief, 2 lieutenants. Sudbury, 19,000 people, a chief, 2 lieutenants. Sturbridge, 10,000 people, 1 chief, 2 lieutenants. So you kind of get the idea as to how the other structure is. So again, my ask is not for a new body, well, except for the patrol one that I talked about, but for a promotion and an elimination of a position, essentially. So,
Okay.
All right. So where else, George, do I have to go on this, on your questions?
I think so.
It's a lot of lines moving around
Yeah.
because of this, but
Right.
what he's talking is proposing another, and I think the lieutenant's higher paid than the sergeant position.
Correct.
So you're seeing the reflection of that.
All right.
Then there's also additional, you're budgeting for some additional training for people in these lines.
Correct.
And then another piece of this would be just the contractual
Contractual.
annual,
We've had younger officers, which means that they're entitled to step increases.
yeah,
as
they're
we
going
go
through the
along.
steps.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
We had a number of years of low increases as a result of everybody being maxed at the top of their grades, and we're seeing that with younger people,
Yeah.
we're seeing much more growth in the wage lines because of that.
Okay. Thank you.
So that's a warrant that you're asking for the other 2 police cars? I mean,
Yes.
coming up?
Oh, yeah, there'd be a warrant article for that.
We'll cover that after, Sean.
So,
Other piece of it.
just a dumb question, because I don't know a lot about it, but the ARPA funds, can that be used for that, or is that just sacred for other things? Or-
There's no reason why the ARPA funds couldn't be used for that, but it would be,
Because it's postponed because of COVID, maybe.
that would be the, that would be the, you know, it would be the select board's role to allocate that money.
Okay. Understood.
Any other questions on police program and budget?
Good job.
All right.
Thanks, folks.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Congratulations again.
Hope I wasn't too long.
Nope.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Next up, switch gears and right into the capital budget. Preliminary for 25. Did you have something?
Just before we get to that, again, we talked about the idea of having questions from the previous week kind of thing come forward. And so having, you know, that was just a matter of having the time to really kind of go through the budget. And so I did that last week with DPW. And quite frankly, between the presentation and everything, there aren't any specific questions other than, I mean, it's very clear where the pressure is in increases, and it's in the enterprise funds kind of thing. When the first week we had we did kind of cover what potentially is going to happen kind of with taxes kind of thing and implication. With the enterprise funds, and because there's so much pressure on that, with nothing we can do about between sewer and water, et cetera, that's just, it's there. Could we get an idea of how that's going to affect, you know, water rate, sewer rate, and what it's going to do to kind of the trash? Because those funds are supposed to be kind of self-contained, right? And so there's going to be significant implication to residents in terms of water rates and sewer rates based on the changes that are happening in that budget. And it's not that we can do anything about the changes, but it'd be nice to have an idea of what's going to happen with the rates going forward.
So the budget drives what the ratepayer.
Right,
will
right.
divide it amongst the
Yeah.
users, and that's how it'll get determined. So Scott has taken at least the preliminary numbers for both enterprises and sent them to, I don't know who the consultant
Yeah,
from.
we use a consultant called Raf Ellis.
Yeah, to do the analysis for what the rate should be.
Yeah, just having an idea, it'd be useful to kind of have that information kind of thing. And, you know, like with the idea with the taxes, it's, you know, it's not nailed down yet, it's kind of a range because,
Yeah, yeah.
you know, it's rough. And that's all I'm looking for. It's like, because I have a feeling we're gonna hear about it when people see their bills next year. so-
Sure.
Okay,
Yeah, I don't know the time for the turnaround to get those back, but I'll
Yeah.
get with Scott to see if we can
Okay.
get that to you quicker.
yeah. And then, like I said, that's the only question I have, having gone through everything. And from Scott's presentation, there's nothing else I can ask. So,
All right. It's a good question, and I wanna be able to answer. If we gave it to you, the budget, once it's, the way it's presented right now, we know what that impact is to taxpayers. We don't have fixed costs
yeah,
that we can't really control, like health insurance, unless we, lose bodies.
that's a soft number
Those
right
are-
now.
Yeah, but we know what those impacts are, and then the schools increase, and what that, for this, the average single-family household, we know what that
Yeah,
$500 increase means for an annual basis.
right.
So we know that, we just need to figure out what the sewer rates would be based on the budget. If we approved it today, what would the ratepayer pay?
Yeah, that's all I'm looking for.
Yeah, because those are great metrics that,
Hmm?
those are the metrics understandable to the public, right? It's
Yeah,
like,
right.
What's the average home property tax bill? What's the average water bill? What's the
Right.
average sewer bill,
It's
solid
kind of
waste?
along the lines of, this is what's happening, and this is why. And so, just being able to have that would really help.
Excellent.
Got that in my notes.
Okay, that's all I have.
So, no, I have that, we can get that to you. So you sent that memo, right? We sent it last night, so I don't know if you want to go over that?
Correct, yeah, so, I think the next item on your agenda is.
Yeah, preliminary.
Preliminary capital plan.
Yep.
And, this was, distributed and reviewed with financial planning on is the same memo and same information that was presented to those folks at that meeting. So the attached pages are the general spreadsheet that goes into the end of the financial planning report for town meeting. So this is basically the summary of the requests that have come through for the 6-year capital plan. FY 25's requests, if we back out, we have a number in there which is obviously preliminary and it's just a guess, but it's not likely to go forward. It's not going forward to April's town meeting for the fire station construction project, which is the biggest project in here so far. It's listed in here as $30 million. That's just a very rough estimate for where it was, and we're going to use that number for modeling purposes until we get a better or more accurate number. But last year, the number that was carried in there was $18.5 million, and for projection purposes, 18.5 is not accurate. So giving people an accurate picture of where things are going to go in terms of issuing debt and so forth, 30 million is much closer to what it's likely to actually come out to, so that people can look at it.
And then
a
as
more
you
accurate-
incorporate even the latest information, we'll update the model.
We'll update it, yeah.
I think we got estimates last
Right,
late
last night,
so
yeah.
that number was way off.
Just
Only estimate.
just to back up just a little bit in terms of the capital plan and where free cash was certified, on the second page of the memo, you see the standard, allocation that the appropriation reserve fund is retained. So all according to our standard financial policies, right?
Yeah, correct, yeah, so, okay, so if we jump over to the free cash plan,
Yeah.
typically annually, we're required under our financial policies to present a free cash plan. At the end of FY 23, we were certified at $3.57 million of free cash, so that's what we have available to spend. Free cash, I mean, I'm explaining this, I know you folks know this, but it's the result of what's left over from the prior year's free cash. It's basically the town's retained earnings. It's generated from appropriations that have closed out, budgets that haven't been spent, annual budgets that haven't been spent in the general fund at the end of the year. In addition to that, it's revenue that's come in above budget. So there's some numbers in here about where the $3.1 million was generated from, because we left $460,000 unspent that carried over from the prior year. So basically, we don't stop on a dime with these numbers. We're required to, it's illegal to overspend general fund budgets, so it's not a surprise that we have a turn back at the end of the year. And we need to, when we set the tax rate in the fall, we need to have revenue numbers that are likely going to be realized for us to have a tax rate set by the state.
Right.
So it's not a complete surprise that we have some money that comes in above budget too for revenues. Our goal is always to estimate as close and as accurately as possible, and those numbers are within 1 to 3%. And so we have an internal goal of having 1 to 3% returns in both sides. So in our preliminary free cash plan, this is prepared very similar to how it's been done for multiple years in the past. We were certified at $3.572 million. We are proposing funding the Appropriation Committee's reserve fund at $175,000 again next year. Using $500,000 toward the operating budget. $200,000 transfer to stabilization fund, and then $2.2 million would be available for the capital plan. And the result of that is leaving $500,000. That's kind of been an annual amount that we've left unspent at the end of this process. The purpose of that is to, that number was targeted to leave unspent because it's one of our reserves. Bond rating agencies look at our reserves as being a measure of our financial health. Our financial policies call for maintaining a fund balance of 5 to 10% of the annual budget. budget, if we execute this plan here, leaving $500,000 and then whatever we have in stabilization fund, we have 8% remaining. And that's kind of been the target year after year. Right now, we have more like 13% compared to the budget before the $3.5 million is drawn down. I don't know if everyone had a chance to look at the memo, if there's any questions about the proposed memo.
So then that 2.2 then flows into the capital budget.
Into the capital plan, yeah.
I'm drawing a blank. Where does OPEB contributions come from?
From the levy.
Oh, we might raise for it, or you could use free cash.
And so some year, or most years, we've contributed to OPEB
Yes. Yeah.
out of free cash.
No,
No.
well.
That's where I need the
It's
reminder.
from the general fund, but it's funded from the levy. It's not part of the town's budget capacity, but within our budget model, it's been on its own, but it's been funded from the tax levy.
Okay. And if I recall, 600,000 is proposed?
600,000 is in our current budget model.
Okay. I was just drawing a blank on where it was coming from and how much, so that's.
Yeah, so, since my time here, the first year I started was the first year, I think, under GASB, we were required to recognize OPEB on our financial statements. The first OPEB study, the town's liability was calculated to be, by the actuaries, $90 million. $90 million.
We wish.
Back in that era, it wasn't required to make Medicare eligible retirees go on a Medicare, to adopt Medicare, and they could stay on our HMO plans. And the town passed a law called Chapter 32, Section 18, and the numbers have now been reorganized, and it's the law of the land. Everybody has to do it now, so it's mandatory for retirees to elect Medicare and go on a Medicare supplemental plan. Those plans aren't bad, but it's shifting costs onto the federal government for these Medicare supplemental plans rather than being on the town's HMO plan. So after the town adopted that law, and again, I'm probably drawing this out too long, but the liability dropped to somewhere around $30 million. So we've been funding the OPEB trust fund, and our net liability is still hovering around $30 million because as time goes on, we're putting money in, investment income is growing in the trust fund, but the liability is also growing because medical cost trends have continued to climb. So we're chasing a climbing number, but we're also, we're only into this about funding it about 10 years. So as we go along, it should improve. The funding level should improve. And then, as you know, with the pension, the pension's another large unfunded liability. We're part of a multi-employer plan with Worcester Regional. So it's legislatively required that that be fully funded by 2040. The retirement system has adopted a plan whereby, they're not gonna raise their overall appropriations on the cities and towns that belong to it more than 10% a year. We might face more than 10% because they're actuarially calculated within that, but the overall assessment that they're gonna push out every year is not gonna be more than 10%. So their funding plan shows us being funded by 2036. At that time, we've used and advised the actuaries to develop models whereby that money is redirected to OPEB. So at that point in 2036, if we're still around, we've committed to dedicate more money than the 600 or 650 or whatever it climbs to by the time we start redirecting the pension.
That same money will be redirected into OPEB.
Yeah, so.
Now, when the pandemic hit and when we
We took
tightened
a
the
pause
screws in the
for a
budget,
couple
we
years.
stopped,
Yes,
right?
Yes.
And then we talked about, as we came out of that, increasing our contribution to kind of get back on the track of the pathway. And where are we as far as getting back on track to what we had,
Well, there's no.
dealing with the pandemic blip?
Well, okay, so we're back, this past year, FY '24 that we're in currently, we are funding it $550,000. Next year, we have it proposed to be $600,000.
Okay.
Just that modest increase every year is probably gonna help us get closer to the liability as we move out into the future. We did take a pause for 2 years of contributing to it, but, you know, it's a big number. I mean, if you run these numbers out, they get into the hundreds of millions of dollars in the future. So taking a pause for 2 years did not have, you know, on an actuarial basis, didn't have a huge effect on our funding plan.
Right, okay.
All right, so, did that answer your question about some of our
Yes, thank you.
long-term liabilities?
Thank you.
So the cover sheet of this capital plan is just basically the funding sources for what's above and beyond the fire station. So the fire station's not in this, because it's not proposed to go forward to town meeting this spring. So, the amount of requests that have come through are $4.7 million. You apply $2.2 million of free cash. The high school is proposing $242,000. Well, that would be our estimated share of the high school's capital, pay-as-you-go capital that they've worked into their budget. That's something new that's happened this year. They developed a multi-year capital plan at the regional high school, and they're planning to assess to the communities somewhere in the neighborhood of $500,000 a year to maintain their building and other facilities. Our share of that would be $242,000. We have that in our current model coming from the tax levy. Other available funds, the assessors had released $600,000 of overlay, so we had surplus overlay. So we've just proposed $600,000 of projects come out of that. That's in the column for other available funds. Other available funds also include a couple articles that had money left in them. The first was painting at the police station. That was approved just last year. It's not an old article, but it was just approved last year. And when they went to conduct the painting project, they determined that the wood siding was degraded and they needed to do a more extensive repair there. So that repair and siding is proposed to cost $200,000, but $70,000 is gonna be reappropriated from that article. It's proposed to be reappropriated from that article. Then the enterprise funds have enough free cash in there. They have their own certified free cash, and water and sewer have enough money to fund their proposed projects. One's a truck, and then sewer inflow and infiltration, that's a study and repairs to the sewer system. And then that leaves almost $1 million unfunded, which would be a borrowing article. And the longest and most significant, the longest life and most significant project is a fire truck, so that's where that's proposed to come from, to be applied to.
And I think based on earlier this week, the K through 8 has an adjustment. Superintendent took a couple of things out of the
Yeah,
plan, so
I
there's,
haven't updated yet. I need to follow up with the superintendent on that. So-
give or take a couple $100,000
Yes,
total,
yeah,
we're around there. Excellent, thanks for that update. So this is the material the Financial Planning Committee's reviewing in the subsequent weeks and working through these capital projects. Anything on capital plan? Or capital budget, I should say.
Should we elaborate on what overlay, a lot of people don't know what overlay is. So every year you put money aside for exemptions and abatements for anybody who might be eligible who owns a home and they pay taxes. So there's a blind, widow, military, a lot of exemptions through the assessor's office. So you set that aside every year. And so that's what overlay is. So the release of overlay is those cumulative years totals that people didn't take advantage of those abatements and exemptions. So I don't know if people, I I didn't know for a longest time what it was, so
Yeah.
when I first got here, I asked what the overlay account had, because I knew it had money available. Because if we were gonna do SA Farms, that might have been an opportunity for us if we couldn't get CPA funds, so. It's available, they released it about a month ago, but town meeting has to reappropriate that money. It can't just be used.
And what's the value on that?
The total, it's 600,000 was the release. They have to have some for every, they changed the law on the Modernization Act. Used to be by year. Every year had to go to those taxpayers for that year. And people can come back after a certain time frame to ask for the abatement or exemption, but they've since consolidated into one fund. I don't know what the total is after the six, maybe 500,000 left, I'm not sure, Jason will know.
Yeah,
that.
it's a moving target because every year it's within the town's budget capacity where we budget for overlay. We basically budget less than 1% of the levy to go into the overlay fund.
Okay.
And the overlay fund, if you were to compare it to a business, would be a reserve for bad debt. Like, it's money that, from the levy that you're not gonna collect, so it's raised on all the additional taxpayers pay that slight increase as a result of there being some people that we're gonna get it wrong. In some cases, the values are gonna be wrong. Somebody's gonna dispute their values through the assessor's office, and that's the remedy that taxpayers have. If they dispute the values that the assessors have assigned to it, they can go to the assessors and file for an abatement. If they're denied, they have a remedy. They can either go to court, or they can go file a case with what's called the Appellate Tax Board, the ATB. So when we determine surplus or overlay, it can be a little bit of a difficult process because we have a pretty big tax levy outstanding right now, so it's a little difficult to tell how much is surplus in it
Yeah.
right now. We typically look at it at year end when most of the taxes are paid, and the surplus generally in this magnitude came from there being some pretty large ATB cases that got settled, and
Okay.
we had to pay for some appraisals for some commercial properties, and we prevailed based on our numbers being good, and our assessor does a great job assigning values. He maintains millions of data points on all the properties in town, and it's called mass appraisal. So he's not every year not going to every single house and doing an appraisal, but he's applying these data points so that we can determine a value for these properties and determine basically a fair amount to tax everybody relative to each other.
Yep.
So to answer that question, I think in the overlay lines, I think there's about $1.4 million in the lines right now after this, but it's not surplus.
Right. It's reserved for those abatements and disputes, and, okay, excellent. Anything else on capital budget? All right. Draft annual town meeting
Yeah,
warrant?
I think you have a copy of it. It got revised even after we talked to the select board about this on Monday night. So if you have this, the revised date, top rate is 29, that's today. One of there are, just from a quick perspective of the 64 articles that are here, we will have 2 prior year bills, which you've never had before, I guess, in this community. but-
Oh, that is new.
We are part of a veterans district with Westboro, Shrewsbury, Northborough, and Grafton. I actually think I helped to promote that district when I was in Grafton, but anyways, they are the host community, and they billed your last quarter late, is my understanding. It's like $700. So that prior year bill needs to be voted on by 9/10 majority of town meeting, and that's one of the bills.
Wow,
Another
it
one-
is 9/10.
It's 4/5 actually.
4/5?
It's 9/10.
Oh, that's easier to figure out, yeah.
But it'll be an annual, so it's actually 4/5, but Tim's right.
We'll get
For a
it.
special town meeting, it's 9/10.
So, I mean, obviously, the service model has worked for the veterans, for the
Yeah.
district, for
Absolutely.
the people. It's an oversight. I'll blame demise of Grafton on me leaving Grafton, so you're gonna,
Likely.
pay the 700. And I think there's 2 outstanding bills for the advocate from planning board that were prior year bills, correct?
Correct, yeah, those just came forward recently. But, I mean, the Grafton assessment was the result of the Veterans District, we were expecting a big credit, and I think that there was a miscommunication between Grafton and the office here. We closed the books, and then the bill came in the week after the books were closed.
Right, yeah, where you could have held them open and then.
Correct, or we could have entered it, if we had known, we could have entered an encumbrance and paid for it from that.
Yeah, gotcha.
So that's one thing. So you have 13 zoning articles, which we're not gonna cover in depth tonight. This document is merely a placeholder for all of the articles. There's 17, there'll probably be 15 after the school revises their capital improvement plan article that's embedded in this. There's 5 school articles. 4 of them deal with solar lease purchases later in the warrant. But obviously the superintendent will talk about the power purchase agreement to put solar on the buildings and enjoy the lease money and the reduced electric costs, because they'll probably buy that electricity that's being generated from the roof at a lower rate than they could buy it from National Grid. But I'll leave that to him. I just wanted to give you an overview. So a couple things I just want to call your attention to with this document. I know there's a lot here. I'll start with 14, senior tax relief. Because you'll have a tax impact and you want to offer the best, most robust abatements from the assessor, the board, selectmen will consider, the select board will consider abatements that might go to town meeting for approval, or might need approval, or adjustments to be consistent with state law allowances. So that's why that's there as a placeholder. Select board has only talked to me individually, they haven't talked as a group for where that is, but I wanted a placeholder there for that, so that's why that's there. Article 15, you might, and these article numbers could change as we edit or delete, so don't hold me to these numbers. It talks about the Marlboro court case, been going on for quite some time. I have had discussions with the mayor of the city of Marlboro, where we do think we're getting close to a resolution. So we need, in order to use the enterprise funds for a settlement, you need a town meeting vote to do that. So I have there as a placeholder in good faith to negotiate, to settle this and put that behind us, and we can move forward.
That's huge.
That's what that article is.
Have we normally had articles for legal cases? Because I thought,
There's 2
because we've had
ways to
legal
pay.
cases before.
If you have a judgment, you just, it doesn't matter what the town meeting says, you just pay it.
Right.
If we come to a settlement, that would have to be voted on by town meeting.
Okay.
And the mechanics of this is that we have the money in the sewer fund balance, and then this is, when you pay a judgment, I mean, typically that would come out of the general fund and be funded
Okay.
by taxpayers. So
I see.
the mechanism here is we want to have an article so that we can take money out of the sewer enterprise fund
We
to
got you.
just pay for the settlement.
I'm on board now. Okay, thank you.
In all the years we've been calculating
Correct.
rate increases to cover this eventual
That's why we
settlement.
have
Okay.
that
That's why we have the
fund.
balance in the enterprise fund.
Okay, thanks.
And then the next 17 are all capital. 33, the status of the fire station building committee, for where they're at, not asking for any dollars. And then the next 5 are school-related, which I covered earlier. 38 is an interesting placeholder. We did more research as late as today relative to, you have a finance director with Jason, and you have, you can have a town accountant try to figure out if
That's
you
me too.
need to have
Also
any
Jason.
readjustment from town meeting from an organizational standpoint. So that's just a placeholder. Based on some research Jason did today, we may not need it, but we have it there as a placeholder. And it just gives flexibility in the finance department to have either or. And then the next one is the Family Youth Services Board of Health. If a couple things happen, the recommendation comes back to do a HHS, Health and Human Services, and the Board of Health, Select Board, like it won't be there by the time they sign the warrant, or it'll be passed over if it's after that. Community preservation, zoning,
48's in the middle there for rescinding.
Yeah, that's simply just
Yeah, it's a
projects
housekeeping
projects
item,
that have closed. This is money that we would have been authorized to borrow, but projects either came in short or they were undetermined to begin with. Just to, not to make this too complicated, but when we borrow for, or create a borrowing authorization for a project that could be grant funded, we may not necessarily know how much we're gonna get reimbursed for grant money. So, for example, one of the things that's being rescinded is debt authorized for the Lincoln Street School.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, two things happened. The project came in under budget, but at the same time, we didn't use the entire borrowing authorization because of our reimbursement from MSBA. So there's two things. I mean, it's basically good news, but it's no major effect on the town because we never borrowed this money. It's just numbers on
It never
paper
went
that we
out,
could
but it
put
was
down.
authorized to be, and so we need to roll it
So
back.
we just want to clean it up,
Yeah.
close out these are.
That's great.
so that's a summary of it. If you have particular questions, I don't have a lot of detail because I don't have the actual, articles themselves in one spot where I can put a warrant together for you.
But this heads up on what's likely
Yeah.
and an outline of what the plan is, especially the financial-based articles are great to have that heads up. Thank you much for that. We'll meet again next week. I think our targets are still finance, including the debt budget, health insurance, MIS, GIS, planning, and the CPC requests. Does that sound about right? Or
And I think we had an informal request to let the CPC go first because they have an obligation at 7:30, so.
sounds good.
Who's going
If that
first?
works for the rest of the tab.
CPC,
Community
or
preservation.
Okay.
Yeah, whatever works best for the presenters and
I
staff.
was planning to be here, so you put me last if you want.
We're not cranky.
Thank you very much.
The following week, on the 14th, we have Assabet, K-8, and ARHS. That's 2/3 of our budget right there in one meeting. Is there a way to either space those out, or can we create more time for that meeting? Because that's an awful lot to go through.
Okay, so.
Maybe
a
start
couple
earlier?
ideas, I mean, could we start earlier? I mean, is
Right.
there availability amongst the board members to start earlier?
I have availability.
Huh?
I can start earlier.
Yeah, I could start earlier.
Probably the school would appreciate it too.
Okay.
Yeah.
6
We'll
o'clock.
see if we can,
We'll check with
I have
Mr.
a feeling
Kalen
it's
as
gonna
well.
go later,
yeah, I mean,
so
They do it.
it'd be nice to start earlier.
Okay, so the four of us, yes, Tim, right?
Is that a schedule we want to adopt across the board for?
I think at least for the schools, for now.
Okay, so,
Just like you said, it's a big one.
so still 7 o'clock for next week,
I mean, I
6 o'clock for the following.
would be okay if we.
And I'm,
If you do 6,
If
you wanna do
for
6
next
on
week,
this budget.
Would it be better for you guys?
it'll be helpful.
It's okay.
Oh, really?
earlier's better for staff as well, right?
Well, we don't know, I mean, who do we have on now? You have debt, finance, we have you. And
Yeah.
last year's, yeah, that will work for everybody. I
Yeah.
think.
And does that help
I
give
guess
some
the
flexibility to
CPC,
CPC as well, if they've got
I
a,
don't know about that, it's probably John Campbell coming.
yeah, so that might help John. Still have John go first, but then,
Or if he can't come until later, we can go until he comes.
yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess we're
So,
okay with
so
that.
I guess we'll communicate